All doctors to the ER.
Do these guys have any idea what they are talking about?
Get squared away.
Spiritual.
Get squared away.
Emotional.
Get squared away.
Mental.
Get squared away.
Physical.
The podcast that'll help you get squared away.
We are back with the sausage party take 2.
Oh, say that enough, that theme's gonna stick.
Yeah, right. Well,
Let's
it's kind of
change
what
the name.
it's kind of what it is. I know we got to get some other aspects. We got to brainstorm some ideas and some thought processes and some topics that would benefit from the female perspective.
And the only input we have is a sausage party.
Yeah.
All right.
What's going on, man? Anything new this week?
Nothing new, just still following the supply chain, which looks like a complete shit show, but
I believe it. Is stuff getting caught up with at the ports? Now we're just getting backed up elsewhere, or is it still just a huge backup at the ports?
It's a variety. It's a lot of things. I mean, you're talking issues with getting trucks there, coordinating that on time, getting enough labor down at the ports to get these containers cleared up. So dwell times are still the same. Container prices are starting to see a little bit of a break. I don't know why. I can't explain that at this point. So by a little bit of a break, it's still high.
Yeah.
You're not talking triple the cost, but you're finding some that are double the cost, and everybody's in line just,
picking those up as quick as they can.
Yep.
And that's tough too, because especially with like larger equipment, I mean, you're not getting 10,000 items or 20,000 items on a container where you can split the cost up. You're getting, I don't know, just a guess, but probably only like 100 different units on a container of a large item. Yeah,
we try to get our own, or what they call a premium. But yeah, some people try to do a mixed container, but a lot of those they fill up and then they cancel on you. So
they cancel? What causes them to cancel?
They run out of space. I've had probably half of them canceled on me in the last 2 weeks.
No shit.
Yeah. So you commit to them, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, we're out of material." They call it, just out of container, and then boom, you're back to square one.
That's bullshit, because you're committing and they're not committing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the conundrum I'm dealing with right now, is that, hey, we're kind of at their mercy. I'm like, I'm demanding for pricing, I'm demanding daily updates, and they just kind of give you what they want.
And that's kind of like our labor market right now too, right? Like, you can basically do whatever you want. You're not going to get fired. Yeah. Like, I mean, other than extremisms, theft and whatever else. But, we were talking the other day with somebody and a post office worker, in a rural area gets paid by the amount of stops they make. And one of the bosses was with, must have been a fill-in. And he was like, "Oh, well, there's supposed to be a post office, a post office box or whatever, mailbox right here." And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, there's nothing here." And he's like, "Well, what? There's nothing here? Like, we're paying by this number." And they figure out that there's like 30 different stops on this mail route that they're just fire numbers. They're not post office boxes. They're just like people own land, and there's a fire number there, but it's not an actual address. Nobody lives there. There's no mail going there. But this postal worker has filed that there's a mailbox there, so they get paid for 30 extra stops that they're not doing. And the boss looks at the fill-in worker and he goes, "Yeah, normally, I mean, that would be grounds for immediate dismissal, but I don't even know if they'll get written up right now because we're so short on help."
Oh yeah. Yeah, I had a buddy that works for U.S. Post Office, and just some of the shenanigans that, these people can, rig the way they do their job during the day and work part of a day and get paid the whole day. So
and I love some of the stories you hear, like the people that, what was it? The one guy, he got busted with like an entire garage full of junk mail. Like, he didn't deliver any junk mail, which, mind you, from the outside point of view, I almost see him as a hero.
Right.
but
why?
He was just because it would cut his route down. So he didn't deliver any junk mail. He would separate out all the junk mail, because I think in a lot of the smaller towns, they separate all their own mail.
Yeah.
And so he would separate all the junk mail before he ever even left the post office. And it would just be in a box. So he wouldn't have to actually stop. And before he went back to the office, he would drop it off at his house And then it just built up and built up and built up. And they busted him with like an entire 2-car garage full of everybody's junk mail for the last how many years.
Wow.
And he ended up getting like, it was a pretty big deal.
Wow.
I think he ended up getting like,
Got
criminally
fined.
charged
Oh, really?
and fined.
And fired probably.
Oh, I'm sure fired, because this has been a few years ago that I heard about this. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And I mean, part of it is like the union, right? Post office union. Like I know we talked about before, you hear some of the stories of the old school, like crazy unions in Detroit. And I hate to say it, but that probably had a big effect on the American car industry and what happened to it in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. I mean, they're trying to make a comeback now, but
How they got to use a lot of that money. That markup has got to go to retirement funds. So
yeah. And that's tough. I mean, you got one guy, 2 guys doing the job of one guy, and you got to pay them. And then tell me why manufacturing is elsewhere.
Yeah, that's too bad.
But I mean, I don't know, but is our local, is people like Tesla, are they still dealing with supply chain issues? Because like, I guess GM and Ford and stuff like that, it's all chips, right? And I'm sure Tesla uses the same chips, but
chips, and they're starting to get material.
Starting to have material issues too.
A shortage of material because with, it's a chain reaction. So when you're starting to lose these containers or they get canceled, a lot of raw materials aren't making it over. I know coming out of the print industry, one of the big shortages right now is paper and paper material. So a lot of the mills shut down in the US, and a lot of them are done in Germany and Japan and Austria because of regulations here. Is
that what it caused? It was regulations.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit to do with labor prices too, but I'm guessing that a big paper is probably not super labor intensive. It's probably very mechanical, right?
Yeah, most of it's mechanical.
Yeah.
But up in even the Fox Valley, there were so many mills that were employing hundreds of people. And hundreds of thousands. And it's with the regulations, with the new inks that are coming out, a lot of the inks now are coming from Israel and Japan and Germany, and there's hardly anything that's made here because it won't stick on the paper. And now you got to make the paper to stick or be adherable going through these digital machines, and you can't do that in the US. So
can't do it in the US just because it's too regulatory.
Some of the chemicals they use to go into the paper can't be used in the US, but you can buy it here.
So that's the dumbest thing. Like we talked about in last week's podcast, like you can buy that product here. We just can't make it here. What the fuck?
Yeah,
Shut up.
You can't use that coating.
That's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
Because you're not reducing, you're actually increasing the wear on the planet because it's being produced somewhere else and then being shipped here. Where it could be produced here, you're creating the same amount of weight, of not waste, but damage, right? Like let's say that chemical that you use has a number 5 worth of damage, whatever number, just to enumerate the damage, right? So it's a number 5. It's a little bit of damage. It's not 100, it's a 5 by using this. Well, if we're going to use 20 reams of this specific paper, we would make it here. That would be 5 times 20. There'd be 100 units of damage towards the United States, right? If we made it here. But instead, we're going to use 100 units worth of damage made somewhere else and then ship it here, which probably creates another 100 uses worth of damage.
Yeah. And pay a premium for it.
Yes.
But, it's a huge lead into what we're talking about today. That's kind of the part of the left that is so environmental and green friendly. But, the thing is, most of the issues are stemming from overseas, between the pollution, the green, the regulations, the chemicals that are using for all kinds of products, not just paper. But they look at it as, oh, well, if it doesn't happen here, then, out of sight, out of mind. But we're still going to have our, activists and protests, and we're going to trash everything here just so that we can be green.
We're going to tweet about pollution from an iPhone.
Yeah, exactly.
That was made for $2
drinking out of a styrofoam Starbucks cup.
$2 an hour labor and
yeah.
And this week's podcast sort of stemmed from a PragerU video that Martin sent me, and was it Dan Prager? Is that his name?
Yeah,
Dan Prager, and he was a senator, congressman.
I
don't remember what he was, but basically, me neither. And basically, he created this online, we'll call it quote unquote university because it's an educational website and they create educational content, but it's not necessarily really like an accredited university. So they call it PragerU, but basically it's just an online content creation to educate the masses. And it's right leaning, conservative leaning. And this video basically it points out, and I will link the video. I did do it last week. I said I was going to, and I did. So getting better at that. But I'll link the video so that you guys can watch it. And it's an interesting video. What the video starts out is it talks about the difference between the left and the right, and how the left focuses on large scale social responsibility. And this is a generalization. So don't like say, well, I'm not like that, right? Because this is a generalization, but it focuses on large scale social change over the small scale independent internal change. Whereas the right focuses on the independent internal change over the large scale social change. And we were having a conversation before we started, and we can kind of just pick up with this conversation where you kind of have to have the small scale independent internal to then drive towards the large scale, right? Like, because the large scale, if you're talking about society, what is society made up of? Society is made up of individuals.
Right.
And if you want individuals to change, which would then make the society change, you have to focus on the small individual changes. By skipping completely over that, we end up with the hypocritical point of view, right? Like, do as I say, not as I do, which is very much a generalized problem with the left is the do as I say, not as I do. And
right.
Especially the elite, right? Because there's elites, there's detached elites on the right and the left. There is 100%. The difference is the detached elites on the right are saying we need people to take better care of themselves. We need, they're saying all this shit. Even if they're not doing it, they're saying you need to do better for yourself.
Right. It starts with you.
And it starts with you.
Line, yeah.
And while that's still hypocritical because they are not taking better care of themselves, they are not necessarily damaging the movement. Whereas on the left, they're saying everyone needs to do better and they're not doing better. And by them not doing better, then you get this hypocritical where you can look and say, well, you're not doing better. No one else is going to do better. And that's kind of the weird connection. I realized that doesn't necessarily make sense what I just said after I got it out there, but it makes sense in my head.
Yeah. I mean, as an independent, I'm politically independent. And when I talk to people on the left, I talk to people on the right, and they'll come up and they'll ask me about different things. And I was in a conversation last night. A lot of people will come up to me and ask about, freaking COVID. And it seems like we talk about it every podcast. I mean, but it's on the news. I watched the local news last night. It was on too. But, the people that come at me from the left, I get a lot of comments that, either I get directed or, other people hear from the left is that they just rely on, well, okay, if the doctor tells me something, well, they're getting paid, professionally to tell me that, and they're educated as a doctor. So whatever they say is gospel to my health. Or the government, they're getting paid, hundreds of thousands of dollars to rule over us. So whatever they say is gospel. So, and that just seems to be the majority of the thinking that over the last 2 years, in conversations and arguments, that's what they say. That's their bottom line argument, where people that come from the right, whether or not they're good examples, a lot of their thinking is through multiple sources of research. It's not just, well, I'm just being told this and I'm just going to go along with it.
It's the internal locus of control versus the external locus of control, right?
Yeah. So if I'm told something, well, okay, well, I need to really think about that. Whereas whatever, the left is being told, well, I saw it on CNN. It's just parroting whatever they heard that day on the news.
And there's a lot to be said for the contrarian thought process. Like I'm definitely a contrarian. If I hear something, it doesn't matter whether it's from the right or from the left, or from CNN or Fox News, my initial thought is like to debunk it, right? So I was doing a bunch of research on masks the other day because we're still on a mask mandate here in Dane County. And I know there's some big cities that are still on a mask mandate. And I remember reading somebody tweeted or posted, or I don't even remember what the fuck it was. And they were like, fully vaxxed, we wear masks because we trust science, right? And I'm like, well, hold on. What science are you trusting, right? Because I started thinking about it, and I started really digging into the PubMed research on masks. And so if you guys have never been on PubMed, basically PubMed is initial publications of scientific studies. Yeah. And then there's meta-analyses. And a meta-analysis is where it would scour PubMed. So if somebody wanted to write a meta-analysis, they would scour PubMed for every single article, every single study that had to do with masks. And then they would take the ones that fit their criteria, and then they would put all those numbers together and try to basically create a painting from a bunch of different works of art, is kind of what that idea is. And when you start to look at the meta-analyses of masks, it really, a lot of the issue here is if you quote unquote trust the science, you're looking at the studies that do not differentiate between N95s, surgical masks, and homemade cloth masks. They put them all together, and they say that masks will reduce in a family, masks will reduce the, contraction in a household by 70%. And that was one of the things that I read. But then you get into it, and on all of the studies that separate it, medical N95 masks reduce the chance of contracting by 70%. Other masks basically have a negligible change that is not within what do they call it? The amount of change that you consider promoting.
Right.
And so the theory kind of breaks down when you get into, well, should we be wearing masks? Well, we should either not be wearing masks, or we should all be wearing N95s.
Right. I mean, if you're going to put out a mandate, then you have to have specifications behind that, but they haven't since day one.
No, and that's where it becomes weird. And then also, especially when we get to like vaccination and mask wearing, what is the goal? What is our goal? Right? Because is our goal to get through COVID? Because that's not a thing. That's not happening. This is never going away. You're not just going to get, after the fifth booster, everybody it's going to go away. So the idea is to slow down the infection rate to not overwhelm the hospital. Is that the idea? Or is the idea to get to a certain point to where treatments are, completely approachable and approved, and people aren't ending up on respirators? Because if that's the goal, then along with masks, we need to start talking about personal health. Right?
Which is never brought up. We've been arguing that from day one. Yeah.
So by completely ignoring the personal health, you then make me not take you seriously about the rest. And that's the issue that I have as a contrarian with all of this. And I have it with fiscal issues. I have it with a lot of governmental issues, is by only preaching one specific thing and not looking at whatever problem you're trying to fix from a holistic approach. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk the other day, because if I said this already, guys, I'm sorry. If you made $10,000 a day, every day, and you started working when the pyramids were built, and you lived until today, you still would not have as much money as Elon Musk. That's where we're at. That's how much money this fucking dude has.
Yeah.
Okay. He said I don't know if it was towards one of the world organizations. I don't even know who it was to, but he said, bring me a plan to stamp out world hunger and I'll pay for it.
Oh, yeah. That was in response to a tweet.
Yeah.
So somebody had tweeted that, if Elon Musk and I believe one other person that would pool their money together, they could take out world hunger.
Yeah.
And then Elon Musk basically, based on that figure, okay, put a plan together and I'll do it.
And I'll fund it.
I'll sell some of my stocks and I'll fund it. But it's a thing,
Crickets.
We're talking about the left.
Yeah.
Every time I get into a discussion or debate with the left, it never goes well for them because they never have any plans. There's no strategy. There's no facts. There's no data. Honestly, being in operations on high levels for so long, I've never seen somebody with a leftist mentality in that role. So to me, It's like you have all these leftists that have all these hard opinions they want to scream at everybody about. But to me, it's like listening to, comparable to going to a doctor. I go to a doctor and he's 90 pounds overweight, smoker, and hacking up a lung. And he's going to tell me that, oh, well, I shouldn't be deadlifting or squatting, or, well, you shouldn't eat like this, or you need to eat more grains and stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to listen to that guy. And same thing with the leftists. If you're screaming that, and guess what? The best thing that you can do is go to your job, hate it, complain about your employer, and then go home and complain why you don't have any money because it's everyone else's fault, or it's the rich that's holding you down, or it's the man. Then you know what? Your arguments probably aren't going to be very solid. So,
yeah, and that's, I think we mentioned it in the last maybe two podcasts ago. You get angry when your beliefs don't have any validity, because anger is the only thing that you have to fall back on. Whereas if they have validity and you've thought through them and have upholding information, right? They have a structure to them, and you're able to explain the structure and explain why you believe what you believe, then the anger is never usually a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that happens on the right and the left, especially with the, like you said, the people that put on all these big governmental fundraisers and they're preaching for everything, the conservatism that the right has, but then you look at their life and it's just a fucking wreck.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And mind you, I don't want to be sitting there and bashing the left, because I've worked for some medium, business owners, and these owners were staunch, conservatives. They put on the parties for our last governor, who was Republican. And that's what they talk about every day. And that's what everybody should be like this, a patriot like I am. And I was in the Coast Guard and yada, 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 yada. But then you look at their life, it's like, well, they're over materialistic and they're lazy, out of shape. And they just expect everyone to do the work to basically, provide their little piggy bank that he can just kind of pull out of whenever he wants. Yeah. And yeah, so it goes both ways. They're basically shitheads on both sides. Yeah. So,
and that's the weird thing that it breaks down to, is like the well-balanced, intelligent, personally responsible individual rarely gets to that extremely successful place where other people look to them for knowledge and education and all of the things that you look to, and I'm not saying that you or I do, but a large portion of our population looks to, the social media, million follower person that's telling you all this shit, or the crazy jacked physical trainer that clearly injects steroids multiple times a week, but is going to tell you how to eat, or the business owner who probably fucked over a ton of different people or got their business handed to them, I'm not saying that there aren't these successful, self-built, well-rounded, but they rarely get to that point, right?
Right.
They rarely get to that amazing, overarching amount of success to where people look at them like, oh.
Yeah. No, it's, I guess the best comparison for what we are talking about is, I look at the military community, especially, in the soft world, is basically, these are our guys. I'm not going to be whatever. The gender I'm used to are the dudes are well trained.
Yep.
And it's no different than, I'm going to use the pre-flight, airplane speech example too. These guys train every day to protect the person on the left and protect the person on the right. So they are training so that they have muscle memory. They are training so that they are healthy. They're training so that they can be fast and they can be, use their techniques so that they're protecting everyone else. And, it's comparable to, let's say, in a civilian world where before you get on a plane and the stewardess gets up or steward or whatever you want to call it, gets up and tells you that, okay, the oxygen mask is going to fall out of the ceiling. And for you to help before you help anyone else, you need to put it on yourself and make sure, everything's working. And then you go to everyone else and put their oxygen mask on too. So that type of mentality is where it talks about, it starts with you. That individual needs to be squared away before you start trying to square away other people, the world, and all these other little, the Greenpeace crap, things that are going on. So, that's where people need to start getting a mentality, whether you're left or right, no matter what, you got to square yourself away, period. And if the leftists would apply that concept, guess what? I think you'd be able to cross over and have bipartisan solutions for a lot of the problems we have in the world today, instead of this fighting and screaming at each other.
Well, and I think before we get deeper into what you're talking about, I think one of the big things you are 100% right on is making sure that everyone has their values figured out, right? Because like on the right ish, the patriot class is what I like to call us, right? We're the patriot class. We see America as the most beautiful, amazing country that has ever been around because of the freedoms and because of the possibilities. For you to rise from nothing to something is not easy, but it's easier here than anywhere else in the world without crime, basically, right? If you want to talk about it like that. But we do see the flaws, and we do see that there are things that can be improved, but we want the base with improvement. Whereas the left sees America as a problem, and they feel like it needs radical change because maybe we're realistic and we see, all right, we have a good thing, let's build on it. And they see an ideal society and are just striving for this ideal society. Is that where the idea of like communism and Marxism is so attractive to the left, because they're idealists, not realists?
Yeah, in a way. I put a post out yesterday, and it talks about you can't talk about the ocean to a well frog. And almost all the leftists I run into, have a well frog mentality. They have not been through hardship. So there's a difference between what you're talking about is 100% on point. If everybody aligned themselves on the value path, your base of all your values. I mean, we all have values, right? I mean, most of us believe murder is wrong. We have all these values. Well, these leftists, I hate to keep using the word leftist, but it just seems to be where it fits, is they're more concerned about being virtuous. And I don't know if you remember what George Carlin said about, virtuosity, right?
I don't remember if I remember that one.
That's in one of my my saved images here. But George Carlin, what he used was, the obedient always thinks of themselves as virtuous rather than cowardly. And that's the issue with a lot of leftists I see, is they go behind the base values and they just pick like one or two specific, tunnel items. And that's how they base their being virtuous on. But they're not going to do it themselves. They never will. They always have to be in a mob or in a group. And it just, it's different. It doesn't fit.
Well, and I think, and so this is where I start getting way deeper into my notes, because I think where this PragerU video does miss is the next step after getting your own house in order. And I think the next step after getting your own house in order is focusing on the large scale social change to try to push people to get their own house in order, not to try to push them to do what you want them to do, but to try to push them to make sure that they are then being personally responsible. So I started getting deeper into societal change, basically, and especially focusing on minorities influencing a majority of social change, right? Because that whether you're talking, sports or any societal change, like let's use the Black Lives Matter movement at its core, not necessarily the organization, because the organization has its flaws, but the movement at its core. And that was a minority of people that saw something that they were concerned about. They believed that it needed to change. And then over the last, 3-4 years, influenced large scale social thought process. Is it changed? Was there actually a problem? That is for a totally new conversation, but just to look at the social change. And one of the social psychologists that I kind of started following and researching breaks it down to 6 steps. And the 6 steps are drawing attention, cognitive conflict, consistency, augmentation, snowball effect, and then social cryptosomnia. And really the only ones that you can focus on here are like 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6 kind of then take care of themselves. But we'll use the Black Lives Matter kind of movement over the last 3 years or 4 or 5 years, however long it's been, as a framework to build this. So the drawing attention is some sort of an event, some sort of an organization, something that causes a large draw of attention for people to even see that you think that there's a problem. And what one of the biggest things here was Colin Kaepernick's kneeling, right? And whether you agree with it or not, I totally see the issues with it, and I see why so many patriots had a problem with it, because he was trying to make a point. He was making a point that we have a problem. We need to look at police violence. The problem the problem isn't with the United States. It's not the United States as a whole that is the problem. And he demonized the US or demonized all police. And that's an issue. But whether you agree with it or not, that caused a big fucking national attention draw, right?
Yeah.
That was huge. I mean, it went from him, and it was a special forces guy that worked with him to come up with that idea. I don't remember the guy's name, but
yeah.
It was a guy that helped him, develop that as a huge attention draw, right? And it went from him one game taking a knee to eventually like every team almost doing it. And so that drew attention. Agree with it or not, drew attention.
Yeah.
Cognitive conflict is the next step. So what is the conflict that you have as the minority that is not necessarily in argument, but isn't necessarily in the thought process of the majority? And in this case, it was police brutality against blacks specifically. Now, is that a problem, or is police brutality a problem at all? Is it a problem only against one race? Like I said, totally different topic. We're just talking about influencing social change here. And then another one would be the storming of the Capitol, right? You remember when that happened, the storming of the Capitol, like that was a big national attention draw.
Yeah.
Now this is where they fucked up. They had zero consistency. They had no consistency in messaging. They had no consistency in time. They had no relentless attitude towards change, whereas the Black Lives Matter movement has maintained that consistency in messaging and that consistency in time. That's been years that we've been going through this. Whereas the group that stormed the Capitol completely failed on any sort of organizing. They organized to be there that day and to do what they did to try to prove a point. But there was no organization past that, and there was no organized message. There was no branding. There was nothing.
Yeah. Which the video footage that I've seen and the way that they held security detail at the Capitol tells me that it was not an organized event by the group that they said perpetrated. It seems like it was staged. You
think so?
Yeah.
I mean, if I was an actual organization and I was trying to organize an event like that, I can tell you I wouldn't put that many people in that type of a scenario without having the next steps figured out, without having a universal message. I mean, that was the 1% or the 99% or whatever they called themselves. Remember that? They were camping everywhere. No, not the 3%ers. No. I like the idea of the 3%ers, but they've gotten kind of stigmatized as fucking preppers, basically.
Yeah.
No, the 99%, right? Remember they were camped out everywhere, and they were in business parking lots, and it was basically this big. There was no
That's a leftist.
but there was no
organization.
there was no consistency in messaging. I mean, they were on Wall Street, right? Like they had the national news media at their feet, basically just interviewing anyone that would talk to them.
Yeah.
And they had no universal message. They had nothing, no steps for growth, no improvements, no suggestions. It was just, we don't have enough money. I'm here because other people have more money than me.
It was just something to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there, the consistency is where a lot of movement falls on its face.
Yeah.
And then the augmentation principle is where commitment comes in. And if you look at the Colin Kaepernick or the storming of the Capitol, like there was a commitment there. There was, I mean, he's never been signed again. Now, whether that's because he's not that great of a football player or because he's something that's too hot to touch.
He's not that good.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, either way, he sacrificed his career by doing that. And that's by showing sacrifice at any point, you become more believable by the majority when the minority is willing to sacrifice. It's also the same thing as peaceful protesters during the the 60s that would get the shit beat out of them, right? Like that's a huge sacrifice. Yeah. And it happened over and over and over. And it showed the commitment to the movement. And then by showing the commitment to the movement, the majority takes the minority much more seriously.
I hate the Kaepernick example, by the way.
I know you do. I don't like it either, but it follows the steps. And it's the easiest.
Surface follows the steps.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it works. I'm saying it gives me an example to use towards the steps.
Yeah. Because his issue versus like a Martin Luther King, his issue is that it's personal.
But does it matter for what we're trying to explain? We're just talking social change, period. Not necessarily whether we agree with the social change or we agree with the issue. It's very cut and dry as far as steps.
Yeah. I agree with social change when if you protest, you make a statement, but then, okay, what's your strategy and plan of action after? It's kind of like, when I manage, I tell people if you have a problem, if it really is a problem, you'll come to me with some solutions. But if you're just coming to me with a problem, then it's just whining. And this guy has been nothing but just presenting the problem. And guess what? You have the money, dude, to go wrangle up some of the, NFL guys that agree with you, pull in together, create an organization, a nonprofit organization, and have a strategy to help fix this problem. Work across the lines with the police and take care of this. It's a small percentage, so it's probably not going to take a whole lot of effort and dollars to help put training programs together to help this problem. But guess what? It's been how many years? And he hasn't done a single damn thing.
We're not critiquing the steps.
I'm sorry, man.
No, I'm with you too. The funny thing, not to totally get away from what we're talking about, the funny thing is the Colin Kaepernick thing just happened to start after he started dating an activist.
Yeah.
It just happened like he went from just normal like football player, and I'm sure he had some cares, but he grew up with two white parents in a white ass neighborhood. Like,
yeah, he had no real problems.
And then he starts dating an activist and all of a sudden sees all the problems in the world for what they are.
Yeah, and he's talking about these problems, but then he's wearing shirts that represent the problem.
Yeah. So then the snowball effect, if you think of a graph, the snowball effect is where the movement goes from the minority pushing the movement to the movement having its own voice. And that's what we've seen in the last 2 years with that entire movement, whether we agree with it or not. And then the social cryptosomnia, this one it was interesting when I got into to this step. That's realizing there's change as a society, but not necessarily remembering how we got there. Right. And if you think about like any big social rights change that we've seen over the last 100 years, like women voting, right? Like we realized that women used to not be able to vote and now they can vote. Okay. All the steps that get up to that, unless we start looking it up, I can't tell you what the steps were. And so that's social cryptosomnia. So then from there, I started really brainstorming, like, what societal changes, right? Because I think that everything we've done up until now is like, we're talking about everyone and all of our listeners really like getting your own house in order, right? That's what being squared away is getting your own house in order. But then where the PragerU video drops out is then after your house is in order, how can you try to motivate and inspire change, societal change for everyone else to get their house in order, right? Yeah. And so I made some thoughts of like things that we can do to basically improve society. Like, and I've got these here, and my first 5 were repairing and maintaining the family unit, whether together or separated parents. Why would you do that? Well, I have a fucking printout here that has 21 different things that have been studied that are improvements in 2-parent families versus single parent families. And it's drastic. I'll link to it. You know, children living with both biological parents are 20 to 35% more physically healthy than children from broken homes. Just simple like that. 20 to 35% more healthy. You know, it's step by step. I mean, not step by step, but point after point after point of things that are improved when both parents are in your life. So I thought about that. And then number 2 was prioritizing personal responsibility. We'll come back to that one after I go through the other 3. Number 3, I thought was stomping out materialism, because I think by stomping out materialism, there could be a lot of cascading effects by stomping out materialism, right? Because if we are no longer purchasing dumb shit for reasons that we don't need, how much do we reduce our carbon footprint? And how much do we reduce? And if we didn't have a materialist economy, the economy is going to shrink.
Yeah.
Like, that's a fucking scary part.
Yeah.
You're going to rip the Band-Aid off. The economy is going to shrink. But what are the benefits that come from that? Prioritizing health, which I remember learning in school and shortly after school that like European countries and what do they call them? Federally funded countries where everything is federally funded as far as health prioritizes personal health over, dealing with symptoms. But then you look at the countries like Canada and Europe and a lot of the countries in Europe, and I don't know that that's the case. Whereas like that's very an Eastern medicine thing, or
Eastern,
right? Eastern. That's very much an Eastern medicine thing. Like treat the root, not the symptom.
Yeah. Which is funny. I've been talking to my mom this week because obviously she lives in Hong Kong, and she said the exact same thing. She's like, I'm almost 80 years old. And did you know, son, that Asians have a lot longer longevity? I'm like, yeah, I know. People tell me I'm like 200 years old. And she said, well, that's because we don't follow the Western medicine way of treating symptoms. And this is not how she sounds because she can't speak English, but that's my best impression.
Yeah, I get it. And I had this conversation. We went out to dinner with a couple, and she was a not a naturopath, but like a holistic health advocate. I can't say she wasn't a doctor, but she was a holistic health advocate. And I said, don't you think that there's a place, right, for Eastern style medicine and treating the root causes? But then there's also a place for Western medicine. Like if you do get DNA damage that replicates itself to a point that it becomes a cancerous tumor, there's a reason that we cut those out.
Right.
Like there's a place for both. Like a hybrid approach of Eastern and Western would be perfect.
No, I mean, it's the yin and the yang. I mean, Western medicine is the break fix tool, right?
Yep.
I mean, your plumbing breaks, you're going to need the plumber. But Eastern medicine is all about preventative and holistic health. And I think holistic, the word itself, gets a bad rap. I think the minute people hear that word, they all of a sudden shut off. All it means is you're just looking at your whole overall health and doing preventative measures so that you don't run into the break fix. You're mitigating risk. You're reducing your chance of getting, larger disease factors.
And then my last one was love, acceptance, and education over hate. Because if you love and you accept someone for who they are, but then you are able to talk to them about their issues and educate them, you're going to get a lot further than hating someone that you don't agree with. So then I started breaking them down, right? I'm like, how could you put these large scale social steps to change on it? And I started looking, and if we really like, and this is like, I don't know, this is framework. Somebody wants to take and run with this, fucking, I'll send it to you. I would love to. I don't know if I have the energy or the time to run with this, but if we focused on prioritizing personal responsibility as the number one, like, top point of a fucking triangle, it would take care of a lot of the rest of these problems.
That's what we've been talking about. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It would take care of repairing and maintaining the family unit, because if you prioritize your personal responsibility, if you become a personal responsibly human being, you are going to take care of your family. You are going to step up when you're needed to be there. You're not going to leave your baby's mama just because you want to go be single. Like, prioritizing personal responsibility is going to take care of that. By prioritizing personal responsibility, it's going to completely negate any benefits of materialism, because you will no longer have the glow from it, because all you'll think about is the fucking stupid money that you spent. You're going to prioritize your health because you're personally responsible, and the love, acceptance, and education is going to come with time when you open and you become a better person. So I'm like, fuck, like this could be the biggest push if you could get an organized group of people together and create an organization or create a nonprofit that you could really use these steps to social change as a minority, as an organization, to promote personal responsibility. You could change the fucking world.
Yeah.
And then my brain got into, like, I actually broke down the steps on like how you could go about it, and that we don't even need to get into that here. It doesn't make any sense to talk about that, because I mean, it wouldn't, unless somebody wants to do it, then fucking call me, email me, text me. I will fucking put this in place. I will help you as much as I can.
Isn't it still the whole squared away mantra?
Basically.
Yeah. So we're trying to spread the word and create a group of people that are more focused on personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Getting squared away.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're doing here, but it's one tiny, if you look at my steps, like podcasting is like one tiny step.
Yeah.
What you would need to do. You would definitely need, like, so if you talk about the drawing attention aspect, right? And this was just me brainstorming, but if you had a nonprofit that was basically just like, Patriots for personal responsibility, whatever. And Patriots might even stigmatize it too much.
The squared away 501c3.
Yeah. Right. So we had this in place, and you were able to raise funds, because who is not going to fucking agree with this?
Right.
Who is not going to agree that everyone should be more personally responsible? We're not pushing political movements. We're not pushing any. We are literally pushing for you to be more responsible for yourself.
Yeah. So you're just creating a group that's going to, promote some national programs.
Yes.
And events.
Yes.
That'll start bringing awareness and resolution to.
And once you have the
personal
funding,
responsibility.
then once you have the funding, you can start to focus on the steps to actually enacting the large scale change. So if you could get some sort of a celebrity involved, and it would have to be someone who's a wholesome, responsible celebrity that you could lean on their values, right? So I don't even know who that would be, but it would have to be somebody big enough to cause a uproar or a big national awareness campaign, right? Social media, print, billboard, like all of this would be towards the drawing attention. And then once you have the attention, what is the cognitive conflict? Well, a large portion, not so much in the older age groups. There is an issue in the older age groups, but I think the percentage is a lot smaller, but especially in the younger age groups, they think that someone else is responsible for where they're at and where they're going to go. The government is going to take care of them. They're going to pay for their school. Mr. So-and-so on the corner who has the big house is responsible for me being in this shitty place. Yeah. And that's where I break down in here is the difference between responsibility, which is about action, and fault is about blame, right? So like, let's say you are the kid that was born in the trailer park with zero, parent influence other than just making sure you didn't die. Right. So there is someone to blame for that. Your fucking parents are to blame, but they are not responsible. You are responsible. That's where the fault, blame / responsible action comes. Like if I kicked you into a fucking pit, right? You can blame me. It's my fault. I pushed you in a fucking big hole.
Yeah.
Guess what? Blame all day long and you're still going to be stuck in the fucking hole.
Right.
Whereas if you take responsibility for being in that hole and you take responsibility in how to dig your ass out of that hole, you are going to be a million times further ahead than still sitting there pointing blame.
Right.
And so that's I believe is where the cognitive conflict is the difference between responsibility and fault.
Yeah.
And focusing on the responsibility. And then the consistency would be like one message that the organization and everyone involved with the organization can push, how to improve this, how to grow it. And all that would need to be developed. I don't know where the sacrifice would be. The augmentation principle. I don't necessarily know how you could show sacrifice as an organization towards that, because I think that with something like that, there isn't necessarily a sacrifice unless talking about it would give, me the chance to lose my job or whatever, which.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of nonprofits, able to, so many nonprofits, let me put it this way. So many nonprofits will hold an event and basically it's for fundraising for themselves. Right. Sometimes the sacrifice is being able to put together an event, bringing volunteers in to raise funds 100% for something else. That's one portion of sacrifice, or there's groups like Wheelchairs for Warriors that basically will raise funds and provide 100% a wheelchair to X amount of vets that, need upgraded wheelchairs.
Yeah. So that's the personal sacrifice, is you're investing your energy and your time as the organization for something that isn't necessarily going to improve your life.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. That right there. We just worked that out. And then the snowballing effect, really the only thing you can do there is try to facilitate it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I had the idea of creating local chapters of the organization, supporting branding and growth. And then the last step is going to basically, take care of itself. The cryptosomnia, after, if we get back to a point where everyone is, 100, not 100%, nobody's ever 100%, but is socially and personally responsible, then we are able to, look out for our neighbors and the way that it used to be,
Yeah.
Yes, America, not every American, but America supported slavery, right? It did.
Yeah.
It was
in that day.
It was socially acceptable then. Does that mean that everything else that we had as an American value is then negated because that was 100% wrong? No, you have to be able to use a scalpel, not a fucking, a bomb, right?
Right.
You have to be able to use a scalpel. Should women be able to vote? Yes. Should people be able to own slaves? No. Should I take care of myself and the people around me and not expect anyone else to do it? Yes. Those things can all be right.
Yeah. I mean, every government that exists in this world, every organization is going to be floating boat with holes, and you don't just completely disassemble the boat while you're floating on the ocean. We have to operate day to day. So, we've talked about this before. I use the example a lot where every organization, every group, whether it's your church or your 10-person, whatever, study or business or whatever it is a floating boat with holes. And the only way to fix it is you have one group of people that hops in, plugs in the holes together, and once you plug them, they fix them, and you're always going to have holes, and you all realize that and work together. Or there's the other people that are the, quote, I like to say, the activists, that are nothing but treading water in the outside of the boat, always pointing out the holes.
Pointing at the holes.
And doing nothing about it. Well, it comes to a point where you're not going to be able to tread water long enough to, point out everybody else's mistakes. But you can't trash the boat when it's on the water. You have to just, like you said, take a scalpel, not take a bomb and destroy it, and just start fixing these little wrinkles, ironing out the small things. Not to say slavery was small, but it was one of the holes in this country. But this country is still the greatest country in the world. If you ask anybody outside of this country or anybody who's traveled outside of this country, I've seen, my folks live in China, and being there, it's it's tough. When I talk to my mom, she's like, yeah, it's the same thing every day. And when I was over there in the residential areas, it's like there's a dark cloud hanging over. I mean, when government controls your whole life, everything you say and do, and the amount of food you can have in your refrigerator, I mean, the little simple things, it's crap. It's dark. It's unfulfilling. And then you come back over here, it's like, holy crap, I can, hop in my car and go drive and do whatever I want. Or if I want to, go to play golf at a virtual golf place. I mean, my mom can't do that. If I want to go to Walmart and buy, 6 cartons of ice cream and sit in front of the TV and down it down, I can do that. My mom can't do that.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we realize what we have here.
No,
unless you step out of it.
No. And what we have here isn't necessarily fulfilling either, because you got everybody buying 6 cartons of ice cream and sitting in front of their TV trying to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
So that's where that's a hole in our boat, right?
Yeah.
So let's focus on trying to improve and fix that hole versus trying to blow up the whole fucking boat.
Yeah. But the beautiful thing about this country is that you can fix those holes.
Exactly. And that's where the differentiation is. We have the freedom and the ability. You let that freedom go away and you give too much to the government. That freedom goes away to improve those things.
Yeah. They start dictating to you.
And I don't know that everybody understands, but whether we're talking about the doctor or whether we're talking about the governor or we're talking about the president or we're talking about, the commander, those people are fucking human beings. Those are not some special space age god. Yeah. I think people have a real detachment from the fact that everyone that you're listening to is still just a human being.
Yeah.
And still has holes in their boat just like you do.
Yeah. Celebrities, you name it. Athletes. Yeah, we got to stop putting people on a pedestal and thinking that their word is gospel and just start looking, hey, okay, how can I get myself to be a top operator?
Yeah.
How can I get myself to be the healthiest? How can I get myself mentally strong? And I forgot who the hell I was talking to the other day. They're like, I didn't realize they were in their 80s because, to me, they come in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, I guess is 86.
Was it Bill? Old man Bill?
Kenny?
Oh, I don't know Kenny. No.
So Ken's this guy that he's 86 years old. I didn't know that. I assumed maybe he was 70 just because I know he's retired.
Yeah.
And he comes to the gym every day. And I'm like, all right, I've known him for X amount of years. I assume he's 70 something. But when he told me his age, I'm like, are you kidding me? And this is a guy that when it's nice out, he goes biking every day.
Oh, he bikes to the gym. I know who he is.
Yeah,
I saw him bike to the gym.
He bikes miles and miles and miles. And he comes in, he does, the balance ball and everything. And he stays active and moving because he understands not just physically, but also mentally how beneficial it is for him. And he's sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, and I see some other 60-year-olds, 50-year-olds, damn it, that are just look like they've aged 20, 30 years sitting around doing nothing with their life. I mean, it's mental and physical atrophy. I mean, that's something that you have to follow up and stay on forever. So I don't even know what my point was there, but
did we just create a cult? I think I just created a cult.
A cult?
Yeah, I think I just created a cult.
I think so.
I mean,
or you created a next idea. Maybe there is a squared away 501c3, but in my experience working with 501c3s is you need a damn good fundraiser, which is why realtors, were the last 501c3 I was with. You had a group of realtors, and somehow these guys know how to get out there and raise funds, put together auctions, and do it on a regular basis. I don't know what drives them. And you need a solid marketer.
Yeah.
That just, marks the crap out of stuff.
Yep. And you need fundraisers and marketers that are going to do it for free.
Yeah.
So they have to believe in the cause as much as you believe in the cause. Yeah.
But then once you get to a point where you're big enough, you're going to have infrastructure, and then you're going to have full-time people.
Yeah,
so
100%. All right. Well, squared away cult. Here it comes. Hope you guys have an awesome week. Take care of yourself. Focus on being personally responsible. What is something that you have blamed someone else for your entire life that you could now, from today on take personal responsibility for.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all have it, right? We all have something like that is in there that we have put blame on, even if it's not a big thing, something we put blame for that we can alter and take the responsibility for. Sound good?
Awesome.
That's a wrap.